Welcome! My name is Kelly Anderson, and this is Fanimated, an animation fan podcast where we get a chance to geek out about our favorite animated media. Today, Kate Callan and Laura Wacker-Hansen are joining me to geek out about Disney's 1998 animated feature film, Mulan. All three of us are huge fans of this Disney heroine, and we can't wait to discuss what makes this movie one of our favorite Disney films. We are also going to dive into our thoughts on the newest live-action adaptation. And with all of that to get into, let's get started and let's get animated. Hello guys, it's so good to have our, Disney crew back and ready to roll.
Hey.
Hello.
Got Kate and Laura and Ferg, of course. Ferg the poodle is joining us.
He's here. He's ready.
He's here. He's ready. He's the cutest. And we are finally getting back on the Disney Princess bandwagon that we left off on Frozen 2 a while ago.
Wow, that was a long time ago.
A long time ago.
That was the last one we talked about?
Yeah, that was the last Disney princess we talked about. Yep.
Wow.
So
Wow.
Getting back through it with Mulan. I'm so excited, guys.
We are too.
She's one
We
of my
love Mulan.
favorites.
Mulan is seriously super awesome. What was the first time, you guys saw Mulan? Do you remember?
We were just talking about this last night, Laura. I can't remember if I saw Mulan in the theaters or not. I'm pretty sure I didn't. I'm pretty sure I saw it at a friend's house after it came out because, yeah, we were talking about seeing stuff in the theater when we were little kids. And the first one that I can really remember going to see in the theaters and having it be a big event was A Bug's Life. And I think that came out after Mulan. So I'm pretty sure I saw Mulan on VHS.
So Mulan came out in June of 1998. So I was just finishing up second grade. So I went to see it in the theater, as I did with many of the post-Disney Renaissance films. And it was great. It was great. I was old enough to not only really love the just the fact that it was a fun movie that my mom was taking me to, but we had seen enough and I was old enough to recognize how I feel like it was one of the first ones that I was like, this movie's really good. It was this isn't just let's put this one on. It was oh no, this was really good. And I also, being a slightly older girl, I just really registered so much more with who Mulan was. And it was the first time I'd seen sort of a Disney princess like her. And I was older and I feel like the story was a little older. So I definitely really, really remember seeing this one in the theater.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And we'll definitely get into it more, but rewatching this, I was like, oh yeah, no, this is one of the more intense Disney films for sure.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about that while we were watching it, of just this is scary and not normal Disney scary. They are not beating around the bush with the idea of these evil people are killing people and it's a war and really scary things happen and heavy emotional things happen with the parents. And yeah, it just felt a little less Disney than a lot of other, especially princess movies.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's not watered down. Mm-mm. It's it's as watered down as they had to make it.
Right.
But they did as much as they could with, the brand that they had, and the audience that they were going for.
Yeah. And even some of I feel like there are a few more little innuendos between some of Mushu's jokes that he has and the scene in the lake where all the naked men run past her. It just overall it kind of feels a little more it's not aiming for that young Disney audience, but a little more mature.
Yeah, definitely a family friendly film through and through. Enjoyable for all ages, definitely. I remember we never owned this VHS, so I didn't really grow up watching it, but I forget which movie it was, had the trailer for it at the beginning, and it's the whole like sequence 6 where she's like cuts off her hair and dons the armor, and that whole thing was basically the trailer. And I remember always being like, ooh, I want to watch that one.
Yeah, I said sort of the same thing when we were watching it last night, the whole sequence where, she's had the fight with her family and decides to take her dad's place, and she's sitting on that stone dragon statue in the rain. And I remember the exact same thing. I can't tell you what movie it was.
Mm-hmm.
It was something that we had, but they played that trailer.
Yes.
And just kind of it was so like the setting and the tone was so much different than any other Disney princess movie that was out, or even just like any Disney movie that was out to that point, that I just remember as a little kid being like, oh, that looks so cool and mysterious. What is she doing? Like, why is she like running off on a horse and cutting her hair off with a sword? And, it just like, it was very it just set a much more different tone, and it was really exciting.
Oh yeah, definitely, for sure. And it did not disappoint. Like it is, still that intense, film, intense story. So for those of you who don't know, for whatever reason, Mulan is a film about, of course, titular character Mulan, who lives in like, I think like 4th to 6th century AD China. And she lives with her parents and her grandmother, and the Huns invade China. And so the emperor decides that, one man from every family has to fight. And Mulan's father is actually injured from, being a soldier previously. And she knows, like, they all kind of know, like, if he goes to battle again, like, he probably will not be coming home. And so Mulan takes it upon herself to go in her father's place and pretend to be a man. And of course, the penalty for a woman being there is death. So she's taking lots of risks here. And she goes, the ancestors of her family send a guardian, which ends up being our favorite dragon, Mushu. And he tries to help her along the way. And of course, as they go, Mulan saves China and, gets all the recognition and praise for, like, being herself and all that good stuff. But we'll get to all that for sure. So let's just start out, like, talking characters. Let's talk about Mulan, how she's amazing, and how she is one of the most underrated Disney princesses.
Probably because she's not actually a princess.
Right.
We just put her in that category. It is a Disney film about a woman named Mulan, but we decided she was a princess.
Touché.
Well, you know what? She technically is not a princess, but I think that it was kind of an important move for Disney to put her in that lineup because, like, she brings something so much, like we were kind of talking about earlier, she brings something that's so different from the other princesses or heroines. They really should call them like Disney heroines as opposed to princesses, because not all of them are princesses, but she brings so much more like depth and diversity to this lineup that I think it was important for them to put her in there. And up to that point, like, Pocahontas was the only other princess in quotes of color. Like, I don't know, it was important for her to be along that lineup, I think, of women that kind of shows that spread of diversity and kind of working towards, obviously Disney is not, they're still working on that aspect, but
yeah.
I really loved Mulan personally. I kind of talked about that already a little bit. I think the best description I've heard of, like, who Mulan was for certain girls was from my friend Vanessa, who Mulan is her, if I'm speaking for her and I'm incorrect, I'm sorry, but Mulan is her favorite as well. And it was as a younger girl, and you had seen a certain type of woman portrayed in these films and in this style of entertainment and cartoons, right? Cartoons and animation, not just cartoons. Sorry, I'm sleepy. And that this was one of the first times that the girl picked up the sword and actually fought, right?
Yeah.
I really loved that, one of the things that I think they did really well, or they got to, and one of the things I loved about her is her understanding that she could be both a woman and a warrior, right? At the beginning, she doesn't really fit in her own skin, and when will her reflection show who she is inside? And I never really liked that opening because I loved her dressed up in all of her makeup and everything. I love girly stuff. And so the opening never really resonated with me because I love kind of at the end when she gets back in her dress and she still fights and defeats Shan Yu. And it's that kind of acceptance of like, you don't have to just be a soldier. You don't have to just be a pretty woman. Like you can be a beautiful woman who's also a soldier. I don't know. It was just that I loved that combination of it. I think that was the coolest thing about her. And such a great message for little girls, not just that she was a fighter, but that she didn't have to be one thing or the other. She could just be herself. And that was sweet.
Yeah, she can be feminine and a warrior. Granted, like it's still the fact that like, it's hard because she still, has to fit that mold of, oh, I have to do what the boys are doing in order to be respected. But also it's like, you've got the time period, you've got the original Mulan that they're basing this all off of. And in general, yeah, it's like one of the first times Disney's doing this. And like, I really enjoy that she can, truly be herself at the end and be, who she is. And she can be feminine and also, kick butt. I really, really love her family.
Me too.
Her mom is the sweetest. Her grandma is the most hilarious ever. And then of course it's got this great father-daughter relationship. I'm all about that. So I love her family, and I love that, like, for her, we know right away, like, she is doing everything she can for her family, and like she's trying really hard to like bring honor to them in the traditional way, and it's just not going well because that's just who she is. So she still decides to take her father's place to protect him, and ultimately throughout the film it's all about that. Like I was always shocked when she didn't take the position of like on the council at the end. I was always really mad about that. But then also I'm like, oh, but she wants to, like, all this was for her family. She wants to go be with her family. So
well, and I think the cool thing about Mulan too and her family unit is that kind of up to this point with a lot of the female led films, family was like some of them had family members, mostly dads, because I don't know why the moms always died.
The moms always die. This is one where the mom doesn't die.
But each of the kind of Disney heroines, Disney women, they're going after love, or like they want a different life. They want to escape from their current situation. And Mulan is driven by her family and by her love for her family. It's not love for a significant other. It's not, oh, I hate my situation in my life and I want to get out of it. It's driven by that pure kind of sacrificial love for her family. And I think that is, I don't know, I always think that's really cool.
I agree.
I think one of the things that is very subtle, but I was thinking about the other day when we watched it, and I think the reason that this is one of the first times that I have thought about this, funny little aside, my family was big believers in taping things off the television with the VCR whenever you could. And so I didn't actually have the actual VHS of Mulan. I had it taped off of the Wonderful World of Disney screening of Mulan that my dad didn't start soon enough. And so it starts like at the Stone Dragon was like where ours started. And I had seen it in the theater and I knew when I would watch it at other people's house, but like I missed most of the families. So watching it again last night, that's just a scene that the beginning is something I'm not as familiar with. But I think particularly in the lyrics of that opening song about bringing honor to us all, one of the things that is alluded to and that I was thinking about, and that Mulan makes this sacrifice not just for her father, I don't want my father to die, but really for her whole family,
Mhm.
is that as it's important that Mulan, without her dad there, it's 3 women. And in the song lyrics, they talk about how like a woman's entire job is to have sons, and that if you are blessed by your ancestors, you will have sons, and like you anger the ancestors if you're not, like that's the woman's job, right? And so here's her dad who loves her mom and loves grandma and loves Mulan, but if he isn't there to protect them, like what is going to happen to them? They can't own land. They're not going to be able to run that farm.
Mm-mm.
Like it's not just, I don't want to lose my dad. It's what's going to happen to the other women in my family if we don't have dad here to take care of us, because we can't, like women don't mean anything by themselves. And that's something that I think is one of those things that like it was alluded to a little bit in some lyrics and stuff, but I'm like, I feel like that's one of her motivations that kind of probably got lost in some editing, but something that's really important because she doesn't really develop that relationship with her mom or her grandma that much. It's mostly just her and the dad, but
Mm-hmm.
it's like this just about saving her dad. It's equally about like, what is the rest of my family going to do if he's gone?
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And I never really, I mean, like, I always thought about that as like, a part that's like confining, but I never really thought, oh, yeah, what would happen if he died? Like, they wouldn't have anything.
Mm-hmm. I also just love grandma. There's a lot of really great humor in this movie. Again,
Yes.
something that makes it super funny. I think one of the reasons I loved grandma was because grandma in Mulan was my grandma a little bit. Um, my grandma was a Spitfire, and she was very, very blunt, and she definitely thought that everyone should have brought home a man whenever they brought home other things that wasn't and just yeah, so I just think grandma is so funny. She's in such a small amount of the movie, but she's such a big presence when you like,
Yeah,
she's only in the beginning and the end for such a small amount of time, but she, like, you never forget about grandma. She's such a well developed character for someone who's on screen for such a small amount of time.
absolutely. Small but memorable
Mm-hmm.
character. Absolutely. Let's go to everyone's favorite dragon, Mushu.
Okay, I was telling Kate last night, because if you guys have listened to the Aladdin episode, you know how obsessed with Genie I am. I love Genie. Mushu is right up there with Genie. It's like, let's take a really phenomenal comedian and show him a picture of like a little lizard and be like, go. Because so much of that was probably ad-libbed by him. All of that stuff that he would, when Mushu appears for the first time and it's like a gospel revival, like the organ music is playing in the background and
Yeah.
it's just like, oh, let me hear say, ah! He's so funny, and so much of the stuff that he says, it's just, I think that he makes the movie. I think he's
For
one of
sure.
that a lot of audience members, I mean, he was a lot of audience members' favorite. If they didn't necessarily jive with Mulan's story, they loved Mushu.
Mm-hmm.
He adds so much to the experience, like even if he's not a huge part of necessarily the plot,
Mm-hmm.
like this plot could easily happen without him. I mean, we'll talk about the remake in a bit, but he adds like a whole dynamic and a whole experience, and like the side notes and tangents, and it really, Mushu gives Mulan someone to like bounce off of, as she is so alone in all of this, because like she has this secret, and having as I talk, I'm realizing that actually Mushu has a major part of the plot, because
Mm-hmm.
he's the reason why they get a fake letter to go into battle. So, well, I'll retract that statement. But
He's the reason she didn't just come back. The ancestors sent the stone dragon to bring her back, not to, they wanted to send the stone dragon to bring her back, not to go win the war and save
Right.
China. Like, he's the reason the entire thing kind of happened.
Well, and I think in a lot of like film and, you know, storytelling, you always have that one character that like kind of is the audience representation or like the voice of reason. When your main character is struggling and trying to make decisions or making bad decisions, you always have, you know, whether it's in the form of like a friend or a family member or a tiny little red dragon, like you have that kind of buffer for that main character to kind of throw their ideas against. And I mean, people have that in life too, right? In their relationships. And so like Mushu definitely is that like kind of audience voice of like, hey Mulan, you gotta do this, like let's move you along. Oh, you are feeling like down in the dumps, here's my way of like cheering you up and pushing you on, and you know, kind of being the catalyst for a lot of the action in the film.
I feel like he and Cricket, I love little Cricket.
Yay.
He and Cricket sort of fell into, I think, a storytelling mold that Disney used quite a bit around the time that Mulan came out. The two that really come to mind for me are Timon and Pumbaa, particularly because The Lion King was also a very heavy story, and Timon and Pumbaa were the funny characters that helped kind of not make it like, why am I showing this to my children? You know, there was some funny stuff that was a little bit more aimed towards children, maybe you could say. And then in Pocahontas, Miko and Flit, being the same sort of funny two side characters, animal characters to the human character, that kind of offer that different comical relief for the main character. And especially, I mean, rewatching it, I love it as an adult, and I loved the storyline of Mulan, but again, it's like without this kind of funny, more family friendly stuff, I feel like it would have been like, why am I showing my 6-year-old this movie? Because people are like killing each other. And I mean, it's that one scene, Kate, that one that you even said when we watched it, you were like, this scared me so much, when Shan Yu has found the two scouts and he sends them back with the message. And he, like, the creepy archer is there, and he's like, how many men does it take to deliver a message? 1. And it's like, I was so scary. That's really scary. They were really evil.
And I want to get back to Mushu and Cricky for a second. In a second. But I do want to say the scariest moment for me has always been when the Han army like comes over the mountain.
We're gonna have to
it still freaks me out.
We're gonna have to talk about like the actual animation, because I have many things to say about remembering seeing that in the theater for the first time and rewatching it on our TV last night.
Oh dang. I bet it was spectacular.
We may need to watch just that scene the next time you visit, Kelly, because you're going to want to see it on the TV to see that computer animation. And I feel like I'm going to have to repeat all of this, but I feel like Mulan was the first time that I just really like felt like, oh my God, they've hit it. Like we're really crossing over into the computers making a huge difference here. And I remember that feeling in the theater, and then watching it on the really good TV, it was like, oh God, this is so good. This is so good. I can't believe this came out in 1997. So good. Or 8.
1998. Anyway. Yes. Oh my gosh.
Mushu. Back to Mushu.
Mushu, the concept for Mushu came from Roy Disney himself to provide a sidekick for Mulan. For a lot of the concept, there was no Mushu, no dragon sidekick at all. So, that was like definitely a turning point in production. And as far as Cricky is concerned, I love this, that a lot of people, you know, the directors and other people working on the film did not like Cricky. Like they were not a fan. And Joe Grant, who created the character, had to keep reminding them about Cricky. And like in meetings, apparently, you know, they'd be like, well, where's the cricket out in this part? And then he'd be like, oh, well, he'll do this and that. And because it's a silent character. So he would also like slip drawings of Cricky under the director's doors just to be like, here's Cricky.
That's funny.
And I loved that. I loved that little interesting tidbit. I mean, honestly, for being a silent character in such a small part of the film, like Cricky is so great because I mean, a great combination with Mushu. Like the two of them really make it. Like you need both of them.
Yeah. He gave, because otherwise, I mean, Mushu needed someone to be funny with.
Yes.
Mulan, he says funny things, but Mulan doesn't react to his humor, whereas Cricky can react to the humor, and it makes it, it's like the first person in the audience who laughs, right?
Yes.
Or watching a duo instead of a monologue. Having another person reacting to the person being funny or doing the thing, like, gives other people permission to react to them. So yeah, because I think the big difference, and for me, it's because Mushu reminds me so much of Genie, just because of, I think, who voiced them and the amount of comedy and ad-libbing that happened. But Genie interacted with, no, I'm going to correct myself. I was going to say Genie interacted with Aladdin more. Genie interacted with Abu a lot.
Yeah, I was about to say.
And that was another silent
Very
character.
similar,
That just kind of gave, like, it made that humor land. And it probably also, I'm guessing here, but I would think going through and, like, voice editing a lot of the work that Eddie Murphy did in the booth, having Cricky as someone of, like, oh, he ad-libbed this line, I want to keep it in here, it was funny, well, he can say it to Cricky. Right?
Yeah.
Like, if Mulan's off doing something else that doesn't make sense, they could animate more content in to go with his ad-libbing because they had a character that could just be there listening to him.
Yeah.
Right. And quite often, Mulan is off, like, in life or death situations and dealing with other stuff. And then, Mushu can be with Cricky and Cricky will listen to him. Like, Mulan's distracted.
My favorite little bit with Mushu and Cricky is when he's, like, sliding down the mountain after the avalanche on the shield, and he's, like, trying to find Cricky, and he pulls up the hun head. He's like, nope, and he puts it down, and then finally finds Cricky and gets him. I just like the duo,
lucky bug.
Yeah, the duo of them together is just so fun and so charming.
I always loved the little bit where Cricky is the typewriter and he's typing out the letter.
Yep.
I thought that was such a cute visual, and he, like, pulls it. He's making the typewriting sounds, and then he pulls it out from under him.
Oh, that's so brilliant!
Such a great little bit. And the little, like, when he does the revival scene is my favorite because it's just so Eddie Murphy and it's so funny. But when he'll, like, lean over, like, Cricky starts, like, making the shadow puppet, and he leans over and hands him the leave, and he's like, "If you're gonna stay, you're gonna work."
Yes. Oh, it's such a good dynamic. My favorite Mushu line is definitely "Dishonor on you, dishonor on your cow."
Classic,
but still just amazing. I love it.
That's the end of that whole bit when that was just such a well-written piece of, like, it was a well-written script, and then it was animated so well, it was voiced so well. When he does the whole revival thing and just let me hear you say, she's like, oh, close enough. And then he comes out and he's like, it's Mushu. And the horse just like, and, like, steps him out really quick. My ancestors sent a little lizard to help me. Like, it's just...
It's such a good meeting of them too. Yeah.
Such a good meeting.
And I'll say, with, like, the entire script for this film, not just that scene, is so tight. Like, I complain a lot, especially listen to our Frozen episodes. I complain a lot about not being tight enough in the script department and, like, cutting things that are unnecessary, and everything in this film is necessary and they move it along at a very nice pace. Everything is just tight and woven together and make sense, and there's no random side things that don't add to the film. And so with every scene, but that scene especially, everything is just done so well.
I agree so much. Can we talk about another character, Kelly, or did you have something else you want to talk about?
I was just about to say we should move on to I think you know. Oh, Laura is fanning herself already.
Oh.
It's Shang.
It's Shang, my cartoon boyfriend.
Cartoon
Oh my god,
boyfriend.
Shang is right up there. He is almost equal with Prince Philip. Shang
Wow.
is so good. First of all, he is animated so well. I love his character design. He's super hot. Let's be real.
It's true.
I love BD Wong so much, who voices him. I love the choice of Donny Osmond to sing
I
it.
mean,
First of all,
Donny Osmond.
you wouldn't even know that like it wasn't BD Wong singing. Like their voices are
Right.
so similar to each other, which is so funny.
Okay, about that though, Donny Osmond like listened to his voice and like tried to like match some things in his like voiceover work to make his singing like fit better. Like Donny Osmond
Nice.
did that, and I'm like, dang, I love him.
I love that commitment.
I believe that because it matches so seamlessly, and just the voice work, the voice acting. This was the act. I don't the pairing of the animation with the voices for it. It can make or break it, right? And it was they were so serious and they were so perfectly paired. And Shang just BD Wong did such a great job. His character, the choices they made with the character to be able to express emotion so well through the style of Mulan and the style of the character work, it's kind of Pocahontas-esque where there isn't really a lot feature-wise going on in the faces of the characters, but the amount of emotion they were able to portray, which I think was a beautiful combination of good animation and wonderful voice work from the characters, or from the actors, excuse me. And I think Shang is the perfect representation of this. The moment that I just like fall in love with Shang is right after he's found out his dad has died and he walks back to his horse and he takes that moment and like closes his eyes and turns his head down to like be sad for a second and then regathers himself and gets on the horse and he's like, we have to go. Like, oh my god, that's just so it's a tiny little moment, but I just love that. His entire sequence of training, like his character arc, the fact that he is like nervous and imperfect in the end with his like, I think I like Mulan. Like suddenly he's vulnerable at the end and it's like everything about Shang is so perfect. I love you, Shang. Be my cartoon boyfriend.
Yeah, I feel like they so easily could have just like made him the love interest and just have him be that. But you're so right, Laura. Like his character arc is just so beautifully written, and like the way that they kind of interconnect Shang and Mulan together and their kind of journey that they go on together, I think is just so well written. And all of the characters in the movie are just so like fully developed and rich. Even kind of the smaller side characters, you find out so much about them. Just great writing overall.
One of the things that I think Shang is a good example, Kelly, you were saying earlier that like the script is so tight. The character arcs and the character development is so tight. It is very clear that everyone knew what journey the character was going to go on, even if it was smaller and personal. They were going to go over it, and it was so smartly tied through everything. Nothing was wasted, right? That it's not wasted that Shang sings a song about being a man and the entire thing is about like physical prowess, right? And that then he recognizes that moment I just talked about, that animation, that for him being a man is being a leader, right? And it has nothing to do with how strong I am physically. Like I have to be emotionally strong now because my dad just died and I am in the mountains and I have a job to do and I have to protect my men and I have to protect China and I don't have time. Like it's me now. That's his like be a man arc. And it's not the one that he was necessarily good at or ready to follow. And that's the journey he has to go on. And it's like, oh, Shang, you're so great. You're like one of the best Disney men. You're so good.
Laura dropping truths. Yes. And I love that moment where, it's such a good acting moment for the animators, and he has to, collect himself and be like, okay, here we go. And I love too that like his connection with his father is like a mirror of Mulan and hers. And I mean, just that whole scene when they come across the village and it's just destroyed, and they just see the vast amount of death and destruction. It's just like really, really just hits you, and it is one of the reasons again why this movie doesn't shy away from like some serious stuff.
Absolutely. And it just, that moment when that happens, this is kind of off the topic of Shang, but the moment where that happens, where again the mirroring of Mulan and her dad and Shang and his dad, but she can't say anything to Shang about it, even though she wants to, because then she'll reveal herself, where she is watching him go through the reason that she has risked everything, which is to, protect her dad and to not have her family go through what Shang and his family is going to have to go through. And that's just, yeah, it's so well written. It's so good. Mulan is such a good movie, you guys.
So good. We also have our, group of soldiers, our friendly, to be honest, as I'm saying this, I don't remember any of their names.
It's Ling, Po is the large one, and Yao.
Gold star for Kate for getting those all. Those all right.
It took me a second.
Kate and I, this is maybe not faves, but I think we assigned ourselves roles in the trio of fools last night.
Who are you?
I'm definitely Yao.
King of the Rock, you are.
Yeah. I'm definitely Po. I'm like the emotional support buddy. Like, let's just gather you all and pick you all up and hold you in an embrace and pull you off the cliff. And
now chant with me. It's when he's all mad
and he like picks him up.
Paul picks him up and he's like, chant with me, Yao. And I'm like, Kate's like, chant with me, Laura. And I'm like, no, I shan't do it.
Feel better?
Feel better? Yes.
There's one more character I want to talk about before we move on to, I don't know, some music. And that is our Huns and our Hun army and our what's his face?
Shan Yu.
Thank you. I just wanted to like mention that this story is pretty straightforward, okay? There is no room for gray area in this conflict at all. And it follows the Disney formula very well, but it does it well, even though it's like, okay, this is pretty straightforward. It's just the proof of like, you can have very simple concepts and simple parameters and really, really do a lot with it. And I like Shan Yu as like, that they just made him as scary as humanly possible. Like in this animation style that is so, simplistic and it's watercolory and stuff. And it's still just like the way they're able to make him and his entire army the scariest thing, and absolutely the most threatening. I honestly think he's one of the most threatening Disney villains ever. And I feel like maybe I say that a lot, but I mean, he will kill you.
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree that he is just like evil. Shan Yu, I think, is one of the scariest. The Huns are scary. I think I will just mirror what you said, Kelly, which is it's a very black and white conflict. The Huns exist to be evil. Everything about them is evil. They are coming to kill the emperor, and they are really scary. They're in gray tone, and they look different, and they act different, and it's always dark and creepy, and they don't need jackets in the winter. That's weird. They don't need jackets. That's evil. They're giant naked evil men who don't need jackets. The cold
never bothered them anyway.
They never.
Gross.
Yeah, just everything about them is really, really evil. And I, again, with the casting and the voice acting, the pairing of his character design with the voice. I do not know the name of the actor. I apologize. Do you know it, Kelly?
Miguel Ferrer.
Miguel Ferrer.
Oh, yeah.
The combination of the animation and character design of Shan Yu with Miguel Ferrer, the voice actor, is so perfect. He is so huge and hulking and evil, but his voice is so smooth and so alluring, I think you could say. It's very, I think it's fair to say it's a very sexy voice. It's a very sexy, alluring voice that also makes him evil, right? I think so often you've either got the smooth criminal or you've got the like violent criminal, and he is all-encompassingly evil in the fact that he is both, right? He is this smooth character. He is smooth and just horribly violent, and he's just great. I mean, I feel like what we've taken away from this character analysis is that everyone in Mulan is great.
Yes.
Yeah. That's basically where we're at.
That's where we're at.
So, who's ready to talk about the music?
I am.
Okay, favorite song in the movie, go.
Be a man.
Is it even a question? Same.
I mean, I think Reflection is mine.
Okay.
I just think that...
coincidence can't toss.
Okay, shut up. Okay, this is my reasoning though. Like, I just think the melody in itself is so beautiful, and like, even, you know, however many years later it is it 20 years later? 22 years later?
It came out
Good
in
Lord.
1998.
Yeah. 22 years ago.
Like with the remake coming out, it's not a remake. The live action version. With the live action, and they play that score of that song through the trailers. Like, every time Laura and I watched that trailer together, we were like crying. That song is just so moving, and I think that like it's meant so much to so many people throughout the years. Like, I feel like that's a Disney song that's really resonated with almost to the level of Let It Go. Just the meaning, and, you know, the meaning behind the song, and, you know, whatever your personal interpretation, whatever your personal experiences and how you relate to that song, I think that, you know, it just resonates so deeply with so many people, and it's so moving and it's so beautiful.
I feel like I like that comparison to Let It Go because that was one of the ones in my memory of Disney movies where a song crossed over to the pop charts. Like, the cover of it was on Christina Aguilera's very popular album. And it was played on the radio. It was on the pop charts, and that doesn't happen very often. I feel like Let It Go was one of the ones that kind of made that crossover recently. A lot of other songs from films were very popular and people knew, but it was a song from a film, right? Whereas that one did really cross over into a different genre, and had that same kind of impact for sure.
Yeah, I really love that song. It was Reflections, one of the, you know, early songs I remember learning on piano, actually. So I definitely enjoyed it a lot. I just like, I'll make a man out of you so much. And Donny Osmond's voice is fantastic. Also, I'm incredibly partial to like just a chorus of men singing. Just
tell us more about how you feel about a chorus of men singing, Kelly. I want to know.
What?
Your listeners want to know more about this.
No. I'm just saying, I like it, okay?
You like the timbre of the male voice.
I'm blushing, so... No, I do. I like the sound of men's voices, and I will like go and see the Christmas Truce at Latte Da as much as I possibly can.
Yes.
Which, side note, is just a whole bunch of men singing Christmas songs. So there you go.
I love it.
I'm not arguing with the fact that it's nice to listen to men sing. I completely concur. I just think that Make a Man Out of You is such a well-composed song. The orchestration is super beautiful. Obviously, Donny Osmond's performance, the way that they weave in so much storytelling. All of the songs in this movie have a lot of storytelling in them. And there aren't that many songs in Mulan. 4? There's 4 songs?
1, 2, 3, 4. Wow. I can only think of 4.
Yeah,
You've
there's
got
only 4.
Bring Honor to Us All, Reflection, I'll Make a Man Out of You, The Girls, the song about the girls.
I suppose there is only
That's
4.
it.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah,
Wow,
so-
yeah, that's it.
I mean, music was used sparingly, but one of the things I like about it is that they're a storytelling device, right? And they help build the characters, and they make movement happen quickly, and that there's nothing worse than a musical or a show where, you know, we're going to stop and sing now for no reason, and everyone has a song. Isn't that that whose criticism of that, of the Broadway version of Disney movies, is that for some reason every single side character comes on and sings a song, and there's like, why is there a new song that adds absolutely zero to the plot,
Right.
and why does every character sing one? She's the only one with a solo, right? Everything else is chorus, everything else builds story. They're placed well. I mean, is the song about the girls a little bit offensive? Yes, but it's supposed to be.
Right. Like, she's uncomfortable and is like, this isn't, she tries to, like, you know, get them to be like, oh, a girl that speaks her mind. And
That's also a song that, like, hits very differently as an adult.
Yeah.
When you're a kid, you're like, oh, they're just singing about, like, what are they fighting for? And then as an adult, you're like, oh, okay. That is what they're fighting for, I guess.
And it's funny because as I think out loud here, as we're talking about placement, why there's only a few songs, and that one seems to me the most like, well, why is this one here? Because what does this do for the story? But when you think about it, this is placement of Mulan has now become friends with all these guys, but they need to remind the audience they think she's a guy and what all these guys think women are, so that when that big climax comes of they find out that she's a girl, you know, why that feels like such a betrayal to them. Like, they have to remind the audience, because we've just gone through a we're all friends and she's been accepted moment, and it's like we have to remind the audience what's going to happen and why it's going to happen. Otherwise it'll be like, well, what's wrong with all these jerks, you know?
Right.
Well, and I also love the placement of that song in particular against the juxtaposition of the immediate following scene of them coming across the, you know, the decimated camp of soldiers, and like going from that song where like we're all buddy and we're singing about the girls and we're, you know, we're trying to pass the time as we go on our way, and then just like the sucker punch the second that the song is over. It's like, it just, that juxtaposition, just like the song itself might not move the story along, but like the placement kind of helps to further the story, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And they had to get from point A to point B, so I might as well sing a song in the middle of it.
Right. I would like to jump back to, we kind of just said, yes, it's the best song, and then skipped over it. I'll Make a Man Out of You. Why it's so good, other than it's just good. It tells, again, it moves the entire, like, training. All the training happens in a song, so we're able to get past that really quick, but still having a really big impact. We learn a lot about all the characters. We learn a lot about Shang. We learn about Mulan. And then the song is just such a banger. Like, it's so good. When that song comes on, just the beginning with like the military drums in the beginning, and like Shang comes out and he's very like drill sergeant, and it just like pumps you up. I was telling Kate, silly story, but that was the song one of my jobs in college, we had a task no one liked doing, and so we would do it twice a day during what we called power hour. And the supervisor, we'd all be sitting like in the office, and you knew it was time for power hour because the supervisor just over the speakers would start playing I'll Make a Man Out of You. And that was how that was how you knew it was time to get down to business to defeat this horrible task that none of us wanted to do. And we'd all just like, it's power hour, get into it, come on. And it's just like, that's how you feel about that song when you hear it, right? You just want to like do it.
Absolutely. It is just, I mean, yeah, it gets the mood, and it does so much visually, so much storytelling is happening in this one song. Like even when the lyrics are like you just listen to it and it's like obviously amazing, but there's so much happening outside of the lyrics, that's happening just with the visuals. And she is struggling, and then she's able to overcome, like her overcoming the like getting the arrow is just like one of my favorite parts, because here's Shang saying like, this is it, you're done. And this for her like could have been this is like perfect. Well, great. They're sending me home. Well, I've fulfilled my duty and now I can go home and be safe. But she's like, well, no, I'm going to get the arrow. And she's like, she really pushes herself and like figures it out. And we see, even from the very beginning, when we first see Mulan, she's very clever and she's utilizing things in ways that probably weren't intended. And here she is like being able to get the arrow. And all of that happens during this song, and it's just so satisfying. Honestly, this whole movie, that's my word. It's just like this whole movie is so satisfying, and this song is definitely one of them. I have a few more things about the music. So originally, Stephen Schwartz was supposed to write the music for this, and he had already written 3 songs, and then he got offered to work on The Prince of Egypt, and I'm like, good on ya, because The Prince of Egypt is so amazing.
Right.
Listen to the Fanimated episode on Prince of Egypt if you want to hear my thoughts on that. But the music was by Matthew Wilder and lyrics by David Zippel. And Matthew Wilder, obviously, I honestly cannot find any other things that I recognize with his name on it. And Zippel worked on lyrics for The Swan Princess and Hercules.
Okay.
But that's it. Like those two are not a lot. They're not like, it's not Alan Menken or a Disney person that's always doing Disney stuff. So they did a really good job, I think.
Yeah, I always assumed that it was Alan Menken because it's around the same time that he did all the Disney stuff that he wrote. And I was like, oh yeah, it's Alan Menken. I'm like, no, it's not.
I mean, Alan Menken has done a lot. I mean, even as recently as 2010 with Tangled. So
right.
Yeah, I love Alan Menken. Okay, but yeah, they did a great job too. They originally had a song for the character of Mushu, but when Eddie Murphy joined the project, they dropped it because he wasn't going to do that.
That's surprising because he's actually such a great musician that you think that he would want to. I don't know. Maybe he just didn't want to sing anything.
There are multiple things that it's like Eddie Murphy wasn't super excited about this project at all. He like refused to go into the studios to record, and he would do it from his own home studio.
Interesting.
Well, he did a great job anyway, and it impacted, a lot of childhoods. So I'm glad that he did it.
One of the things I wanted to just say about the orchestrations and the structures of the songs, that I think you can tell that it's a different composer, and it's just such a different story. I think that it makes sense. There's so many little musical tidbits in the songs. They're so packed with just the instrumentation and the like borrowing different themes. There's a lot of kind of like poppy sounds in them too, like definitely like the music sequence where it's raining and she's gonna she's gonna cut her hair off. That one,
that sequence 6, that's what
sequence 6 it's very 90s, right? That do 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 do, like that kind of synth, but then the horns come in. Like his use of really traditional instruments with like traditional orchestra instruments, traditional Chinese and Asian influence instruments and sounds, and then also kind of pop music influence. It just created these really full, like, it touched on everything. It was of the time, it was of the place and the time period, but then also of the emotion that they were trying to tell, right? And the feeling they were trying to tell. The other thing that comes to mind for me where like it seems like he didn't care as much about authenticity as much as he cared about making you understand what he wanted you to feel. Is at the end of the girls' song, I guess that's what we've dubbed it this episode, a girl worth fighting for. At the end of A Girl Worth Fighting For, right in the last chorus, there's a little bit of the 1812 overture, I think. Like that comes in a little bit at the end, and it's this very, I mean, he's, it's, that's this sound that has this sort of like chummy, celebratory soldier feeling. It seems like he was super unafraid to borrow and to not just stick to one genre or one sound to make you feel something, which I think like it fit Mulan so well because Mulan wanted you, like, that's what Mulan was doing. It was about not fitting into molds, right? It was about being true to what you feel. And I feel like his composition did the same thing, which is very cool.
And I will say too that it's Jerry Goldsmith who's the composer of the score.
Okay.
And the other men were working on the singing songs, whatever you say. But yes.
Well, all three of them did a great job of having, it seems like that was kind of the overall theme of the music, was that it didn't have to fit into one specific mold. It was drawing on all different genres and inspirations to make you feel what they wanted you to feel at that point in the movie.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's all very cohesive and fits very well. So I agree. It's great music. It's great. So a little bit about animation production. Mulan is the 36th Disney animated feature and the 9th in the Disney Renaissance, directed by Tony Bancroft and Barry Cook. I want to say that Chris Sanders and Dean DuBois were also involved just because they're my How to Train Your Dragon friends and I love them and anything that they touch is gold. I'm very biased. Speaking of sequence 6 that we've mentioned several times already, so that is the sequence where she takes her father's conscription note and cuts her hair and dons the armor and runs away and all of that. Very intense. That was reworked several times, and eventually Dean DuBois was tasked with revising it, and he made the decision to do it all with very minimal dialogue, which is classic DuBois, because Forbidden Friendship scene in How to Train Your Dragon is my favorite. He's just Lilo and Stitch, like everything he does is like, he's a big fan of that no dialogue stuff, which, for me, especially Forbidden Friendship was the first time I was like, this is how you tell a story. Like being able to tell a story without any dialogue, I'm always just like in awe of what people can do. So that sequence, once he got it right, like they were like, this is it. It was a huge part in establishing who Mulan was, her character, and it was the very first sequence they put into production. They were like, this is like the center on which we're making everything, which I just think is so fascinating and so cool. And like throughout all of the production, it stayed, relatively what DuBois, did originally. So just a beautiful sequence, and I had to mention it.
One thing about that little sequence that is one of my favorite moments in the entire, because I love symbolism and imagery and all of that stuff. Even as a little girl, I was very caught by just the entire sequence is beautiful, but she's just sung Reflection, and that she doesn't understand who she is, all made up and trying to be this other person. And that when she makes this decision to do this, it's that image, and it's so simple, there's not even really a background, where she pulls her dad's sword out and you see her reflection in the sword, and then she turns it to the side and cuts all of her hair off. Just that little piece right there, paired with knowing what the scene before that was going to be. I don't even know if they knew, but like that, the combination of that song and the image of her not feeling good about her reflection, and then that being such a poignant, that image was, in all of the trailers. Oh, what a gorgeous little piece of animation and of imagery. Like, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Absolutely. I would agree. It's so good. Ooh. It just like that whole sequence just makes you just like feel all the feelings. Most of the production actually took place in their Florida studio and not in their California studio, which I thought was fascinating. I think it was one of the first like full-length Disney movies that was like mostly done in Florida. So that's cool. And although, of course, Ming-Na Wen voices Mulan, Lea Salonga voices the singing voice of Mulan. And of course, she's also the singing voice of
Princess Jasmine.
Yeah, so she's like a double princess.
She's a queen, is what she is.
Oh,
yeah. She's a damn queen.
She is.
Interestingly, she did audition for like the voice of Mulan too, and they were considering her, but she couldn't make a convincing, like boy Mulan, like when she's has to be Ping,
Mm-hmm.
And so they.
She does have a very kind of light, very feminine speaking voice, so I can see how that. I'm like a massive fan of hers, so that's only why I'm like correcting Kelly.
For those of you who don't know, Lea Salonga is a Broadway baby, so Kate is obsessed with her.
She's the best.
And rightly so. She does a fantastic job. Okay, so the animation style was influenced by ancient Chinese painting. They wanted it to look more watercolor and simpler in design as compared to Lion King and Hunchback, which had come previously. And it's a very, simple, I would say just very rounded almost. I just think of some animation it's like very angular or square, and this is very circular, I suppose. And all the shapes are more curved, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I know it's very different because Pocahontas was more angular style animation and less curved and rounded, but it reminded me a lot of Pocahontas when I was younger, and it still does. I think particularly in that they spend so much time outside, and that I think it's a super interesting choice. I think that both films, and Mulan especially, the backgrounds and the sets and a lot of the large scale action is really, really detailed, but the characters are very, very simple. But the things that are detailed tend to be like natural, more like connected to nature, very flowy things. And that the people are very simple within that setting, which I think is an interesting juxtaposition. I also think it's more of a challenge, honestly, for an animator to be able to draw emotion and feeling out of a character with a much, much simpler design than a character that you can move every little tiny muscle under the fake skin of their face on the computer,
Yeah. And how much more, you have to do with body language and how the whole character is moving. And obviously like 3D animators with all of their, specific details are doing that too. But it is different, and they did a great job of it. Let's talk about software. Woo! All right. So Fergus here.
Is really excited to talk about software.
Oh, hello.
He is really, this is his favorite part of Mulan, is the software animation.
Oh, he's licking your nose. That's the cutest. He loves you so much.
He's so excited about this. He's like, Mom, tell him about the Huns. I like
the Huns. All right, let's talk about software. They developed multiple different softwares for this film, including what they called Attila, appropriately enough, which I just seriously love how they name all of these software things. Like every single movie they make a 3D software for is just like, they always name it something so clever. Attila was used to create the 2,000 Huns in the Hun army that come down the slope, which is the scariest part of the movie, in my opinion. And it's a and they had a similar technology called Dynasty that was used for the crowd of 3,000 in the Forbidden City scenes. And so, of course, that's like keeping track of all of those thousands of individual characters and having them all move and not, like run into each other. And all of that. You should listen to our Lion King episode, actually. We talk about something similar with the what animal is that?
The stampede,
herd.
The wildebeest.
Wildebeest, thank you. Stampede of the wildebeest. Same concept, basically, except with 2,000 Huns. Can I just take a moment to pause on that? Because I'm serious. Like, even watching it now, I'm like, it terrifies me when it's just him up at the top, and then all of a sudden you just hear and the music comes, and you just see all of the thousands of Huns that are like coming over the edge, and you're like, ah!
It's just the coolest part.
This scene in the theater as a child, as anyone, because my dad came to see this film with us, and he does not go to a lot of movies. I think my mom dragged him. He does not really like animated films. He still talks because it doesn't look animated. It looks real. It looks real. And I cannot tell you that feeling when he's up there and the ridge line fills out, and the sound and the horse sounds, and they come up and over. And when you were in the theater with all the sound equipment, the theater was like shaking. Like you could feel the Huns coming down. And it was so unbelievably real and so scary and so good. It just, and again, that I loved that it was juxtaposed to this super simple character design, because it kind of was like, you know what, it's almost like we made a choice for the characters to be simple. Look how good we are at our jobs. Is that weird to say? Like, I love that juxtaposition of like, this was an artistic choice to do this character design, and then we can still tell this really cool story. I don't know, it's so good. It's so good.
Another piece of software that was developed for the film was called Faux Plane, that added depth to illustrations, used primarily for the Great Wall of China scene at the beginning and the palace at the Forbidden City, both of which, it was really cool to see. And like so just as normal 3D animation does, they got this beautiful illustrated 2D work that they add dimension to. The scene at the end with all of the people bowing to Mulan, that is actually a panoramic film of real people bowing, edited into the foreground of the scene.
That's super cool.
Well, because I always thought that scene looked super, like, hokey.
I mean, that might be part of why, honestly.
You know what's so funny is that I didn't know that. I wish you all could see the shock on my face, but also realization. Because the last few times I've watched this, I felt like I didn't understand why the animation of the people bowing was just like blank circles, no faces, sort of a wave of color and circular faces bowing down. And then I'm like, okay, a few scenes ago, all these characters were really detailed in the crowd. Like, did we just run out of time? Or like, why does it look so different? And so that makes sense that scene looks so different than all the previous scenes with the people in the crowd.
It does. It looks a lot different. And that's why it looks a little wonky, I think, because it doesn't quite fit. Like, you could tell.
Yeah.
But
that's really cool that they were able to incorporate that technology in there. Like, I don't know that I've ever heard of another animated film doing something like that.
I definitely, and I can't remember what film that did something similar. So I have heard of it before, but I did not know that they used that for the scene. I thought that was really cool. And I mean, yeah, because you just think it's like, how else are they going to pull this off? Like animating all that or getting, I don't know. But it works. It works. I also just wanted to mention the original Mulan folktale. This is basically off of the Ballad of Mulan, which is the first recorded story of Mulan, but there are several iterations of, as most fairy tales, folk tales are. She's the folk heroine, 4th to 6th century AD China. In the original, she does take her father's place as a soldier. And after she actually is a soldier for 12 years, she goes on all sorts of escapades, military escapades, and becomes an honored soldier. She's honored by the emperor, and just like in the film, is offered a position of high office, which she refuses. She goes back home in the original story, and finally, at the very end of all that, reveals that she is a woman, to the shock of her comrades, who all believed otherwise for 12 years. So I thought, that was interesting that really they didn't, do too much, away from that. Like sometimes they really, really take a left turn on certain folktales. But of course they added the dramatic effect that she's revealed much sooner, of course. But yeah, I mean, it was mostly the same premise. And interestingly, like at the beginning of production, it was going to be extremely different. I'm trying to remember. I think it was like Shang was actually a character that she was like being engaged to, and she left to become a soldier of her own accord, of kind of like a defiance step, instead of I'm going to do this for my father step, which completely would change Mulan's character completely. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, I like that they did what they did and made it more true to the original folktale. In some ways, at least. Obviously, there's not a talking dragon in the original.
Right. So
yeah, all in all, I say, like, my concluding thoughts are that Mulan is just a tight story. It ends in a super satisfying way. I love the ending. There's no extra tidbits like some films. It moves quickly, and it's the Disney formula, but it's the Disney formula done right. So it's definitely up there in my favorite Disney films.
I think Mulan is one of their best films, but I think it came later in the Renaissance and people forget about it for some reason. And it's one of the best ones of that era. It's just one of the best, from story, animation, music, character, movies I'd want to show my kids.
Yeah.
Mulan's one of the best.
It's really great.
Agreed all around. I love so much of it. And with that, let's move on to discussing the live action remake of Mulan that came out earlier this year. Mulan is so good, guys. Laura, tell us your thoughts. You're dancing.
I loved it so much. I thought that it was the best Disney live action version that they have ever made.
Wow.
Yes, because I think that there was a reason. I think it improved upon the story. I think that it made it different enough. I think it just, the changes they made it, there was a reason that they made it again. So many, even Cinderella, our reigning favorite, was just to see a live action Cinderella. They just did it well, but they did nothing new. In my opinion, I don't think they added much of anything to the story.
Cinderella is still my favorite Disney live action. So,
but I just loved this live action Mulan. I will fight whoever wants to talk about this because this is a great film. I cannot wait to show all my girlfriends this film. I feel great. I feel like it took everything that was empowering about Mulan and updated it to, it is the year 2020 and we're going to continue being empowering. We're still being true to Disney and still being true to what Mulan was, which was their like darker, kind of more adult, like this was a darker, they couldn't go all the way because they're still Disney, but like this was so dark compared to so much of the other stuff that they've done. It just, I could just ramble and ramble and ramble because I loved it. And you can ask me specific questions in a bit because it's so good. Kate, what do you want to say?
I just wanted to springboard off of what you said earlier, because I fully agree with kind of what you just said about like the previous kind of live action versions. Like they were fine and they were good and they were entertaining, but like it felt like with Mulan there was a reason that it needed to be done in a live action format. There was something, I think, because of the content of Mulan, because of the storyline, there was a reason that they could take this story and kind of do something a little different with it and change it a little bit and reformat it and make it make sense for live action. I think particularly, as much as I did enjoy the movie, like Beauty and the Beast, what was the point? Even Aladdin a little bit. Like, what was the point other than like Disney making a big buck? Like there wasn't really any point to like redoing it, or like because they didn't really say anything different than the original. They maybe made like some extra plot changes, but Mulan really, I think, lent itself really well to like doing something a little different and like reformatting it and like, I don't know. Kelly, what are you gonna say?
I will say that I do think that we, as growing up on the originals, forget a little bit that part of the reason that the live actions are good and have a reason to exist is to bring new, younger audiences into those franchises and into those stories that probably have never seen the originals. And for Disney to make a quick buck. But also, side note, Beauty and the Beast, if Beauty and the Beast is only in existence for the song Evermore, that's fine with me.
That's true. I forgot that you are like obsessed with that song.
Speaking of that, I think one of the things that was a real triumph here, and it reminded me a little bit of Cinderella in this, is that they chose not to make it a musical, which I think that's when, that for me is really where I don't like the Disney remakes, because that's the difference between a remake and a live action version to me. When we are just singing the same songs and using the same scenes and using the same visuals, Lion King shot for shot, right? Like, what's the point? And I don't want to hear someone other than, I don't want to hear Will Smith sing Robin Williams' songs. It was fine, and you can listen to our great episode about Aladdin to hear about that. But I loved that. I think you can almost tell that they're learning from the reception of their live action films of like what's working, what's not working, what do we think, like why are we doing this? And instead of just having it be the same thing, they took the music and they tied it into the score and they used those beautiful themes. Kelly, you wanted to talk about inviting people into this story. They used the same music and they used it to evoke that emotion and that connection. And then to those of us who love the animated, like it harkened back and you remembered and you heard it and you thought about it and you loved it, but it also was placed so well that it created that same emotional connection that it did when you saw it, sung in the animated one for the first time. It just, it was so pretty. I loved some of the choices that they made with when to use CGI and when not to use CGI. I think so much of like a lot of their there's been so much CGI and so much razzle dazzle. There's a ton of CGI in this. There's a woman who turns into a bird. I'm not saying there's no CGI, but I loved like the use of actual stunt riders and the use of actual people on horses instead of that being animated, the amount of actual sword work that gets done and really beautiful, authentic blade work with the actors is really, really beautiful. The costuming was gorgeous. The colors, the sets, I really liked it. I loved the new lady character. I'm rambling. I hope everyone listening to this just likes a giant ramble because we have no actual topics about it other than the fact that I just loved it so much. And I cried at the end. And I loved it.
Oh, Laura, I love that you loved it. And it definitely, like, you really loved, like, authentic, fight choreography, and you really love authentic costuming. And so, of course, yeah, those things are absolutely amazing. I totally agree. I definitely liked this one a lot more than some of the other live actions. I liked it a lot more than I thought I was going to, honestly. Like, going in, I was like, oh dear, this is going to be a dumpster fire. But it was actually, I was thoroughly entertained. I was so upset about the music because I just love the music so much. But it didn't have time for the music. It was like, we've got story to tell, we've got stuff to do. Like, and like you said, it was taking that away, taking Mushu away, made it a more serious film. And they were able to introduce the magician woman and her whole story and that whole section, which I think is like we said, like one of the big things for me that makes the live action great is an addition or really retelling something. And that's what they did with this one, and I think they executed it pretty well. I mean, I have some faults with their pacing, and I wish there would have been more with the witch woman, but also, like, again, I had a fantastic time watching it. I will watch it again. I think it's a great, great, great film for young girls. And I really enjoyed it.
We can't get through a Disney with the Girls episode without Laura getting on her soapbox.
I was wondering when this was going to come. All right, here's your soapbox.
I think one of the reasons that I really, really loved it, just even on a principle standpoint, and it came out of the fact that the criticism that I was hearing about this movie came particularly from men who had watched this movie and complained that they took out all the good parts. And this was before I had seen it. And I was like, oh no. And they're like, well, Shang's not there, and Mushu's not there, and the cricket's not there, and the grandma's not there, and it's not funny. And then I watched it, and I'm like, oh no, okay, I like those parts. I like Shang. Like, I purposely tried to do zero research about it. I just wanted to, like, take it in, so I really didn't know anything about it. And I watched it, and I'm like, oh, you know what they did? They stripped away all the BS that they feel like they have to load into stories about females so that boys will like them. There is this bizarre, how come a movie about cars is for boys and girls, but a movie about a girl needs to be funny and have a funny dragon and have a boy character? What are the boys gonna do?
Or why do we have to rename Rapunzel so that it appeals
Tangled, so that they'll take
boys?
The boys. That I was just gonna say that. Why is it Tangled instead of Rapunzel? Oh, because if it's called Rapunzel, the boys won't see it.
Why is it Frozen and not the Snow Queen? Like, come on.
This was unapologetically a film about a female story, and it wasn't saying it wasn't for everyone, but they stripped away all the junk that makes it, oh, this is a story everyone will like. Everyone can enjoy a story about a woman. We enjoy stories about boys all the dang time. Boys can like stories about women. Boys can learn about themselves by watching a woman learn about herself. Because we're all people and we all experience the same emotions. So that, for me, I think is one of the big things. It came out of this resistance of hearing men criticize that they took out all this boy stuff, and I didn't like it anymore. So you don't like the story of Mulan is what you're telling me, because everything that's not there had nothing to do with the actual story. So that's how I feel about it. They took it and they said, this is unapologetically a story about a woman, and if you don't like it, maybe we need to talk about something a little deeper than how you feel about this movie.
Thank you, Laura.
You're welcome. I shall step down now. Kelly's looking at me like, you're done, Laura.
No, I love it. I love to hear it. I love to hear your thoughts.
I just think that's really important, particularly in the world of animation and a lot of the stuff that we talk about, these stories about girls. I am absolutely sick of feeling like we have to add masculine elements to stories that are deemed too feminine to be enjoyed by little boys. My older brother's favorite Disney movie before he became aware of gender stereotypes was The Little Mermaid. He loved The Little Mermaid. Even that was full of stuff for boys, but it was called The Little Mermaid, and he liked Ariel. I mean, I don't unapologetically story about women, and everyone can enjoy it. The end. Off the box.
Mic drop, Laura. I would agree. It's a problem that animation and media in general has had for a long time with if there's a main female lead, it is automatically for girls. If it's a main boy lead, it is for everybody. That is the constant story of, especially, I mean, like film animation, TV animation, don't even get me started because advertisements. But because again, like we still live in a world where like they have to target a show specifically towards a specific demographic in order to sell ads to that demographic. So it has to be for boys or for girls, because I can't show a doll ad and a Hot Wheels ad at the same time. What? Mm-hmm. Of course, like at least in my experience, like being part of so many fandoms, like the fandoms for these shows vary so widely in both gender and age that like it just seems ludicrous that there are still people in suits, you know, making these decisions based on, you know, a specific demographic. But alas, we are still here and we're getting there, you know. I mean, with shows like even like I feel like She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. Okay, yes, it's like girl power. But I know so many like, you know, guys that like that show too, you know, and stuff. So yes. So going back to Mulan, I would agree.
That is 100% what I'm saying is boys do like that stuff. For some reason, there's this big talking head up in the clouds saying, well, boys won't like it because there's this one very small toxic group of men who are all, you know, don't, you know, unless they feel like a macho man, you know, they're not a man. And I'm sorry. Men like that type of entertainment also. Just like you said, there are so many men who enjoy that type of entertainment. We have to make it okay. And I feel like Mulan, and the reason that I will stand up for this remake is that out of live action film, out of any one of their heroine stories, this is the one where you had to do it, right? Because that's what Mulan is about. It's about being true to yourself, about not fitting into a mold. And those little pieces of like, oh, we got to add the boy characters, like that, it's putting it into that mold, right? It's like we're not even being true to the message of this story if we don't just tell her story and tell it purely and take away all the fluff. And they did that they added another female. They even addressed it with their new character, right? That the patriarchy is still telling strong women how to be strong and trying to control it. That's the entire storyline of the new female character, right? Is that kind of birth of like the women who's can only be strong because men allow them to be versus the woman who's strong in her own right. And the realization and like taking control of that. And that's what women want. And it just, Oh, it's so good. They also, one of the other things they fixed, which I love that they changed Shang's character, because in the year 2020, it took away the problematic being in love with your boss and the power dynamic difference of that he ranks above her and he's, her boss and blah, blah, blah. That it was with a peer, I think was so empowering and so cool. I also love that they added then the father dynamic of they kept that kind of secondary father figure dynamic that was Shang and his father by having the person training them, the general, be like a father figure and talking about his children with Mulan. And I just loved it, guys. I don't know.
I really liked Mulan's dad too, like in the original and this live action. I like that they even emphasized it more, and she's got a little sister, which is so sweet.
Her sister.
So fun. And it really makes it that she's doing it for the whole family and she wants to protect everyone. And I mean, she's always been protecting her sister and now she's, protecting all of them again. And yeah, just the use of this power within her that is stronger when she is herself, that's so great. I love it.
Everyone should go see it. I believe it's becoming more widely available very, very soon. So I encourage all of you to watch it.
I do believe by the time that this episode comes out, it should be available on Disney Plus for people to watch.
I think it's also going to be on Amazon Prime, actually.
Oh, really?
Rentable on Amazon Prime.
Nice.
All right, then. Very cool. Our next live action movie, I think, is The Little Mermaid. Is that right?
Yes, I think that's supposed to come out next year. Again, don't know why that's necessary, but Little Mermaid is my favorite. So I'm just like, you better not screw this up, Disney.
Well, I hate to disappoint you, but their track record is not great.
I am excited. It looks like they've got a good cast, though. Like, I'm excited about the cast. I just didn't need another version of Little Mermaid, but that's just me.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. All right. Well, I think that's it for us. That's all of our mini thoughts about Mulan. Great film originally, great live action. Everybody go watch Mulan and let us know what Disney princess we should be watching next. Disney princess movie.
Disney heroine that we should be watching next.
Thank you. What Disney heroine are we watching next?
I think we should talk about Pocahontas at some time.
Pocahontas! Sorry, we ruined your ending. Go ahead and re-say that, Kelly.
I have no idea what I was going to say. So I'm always terrible at endings. So here we are.
I love that you're like, hey, listeners, let us know what you want to talk about next. And then Kate and I are like, oh, let's talk about this.
Well, listeners, you know what you can do is you can become a patron on patreon.com/Fanimated. Become part of the Fanimated crew. For only $1 a month, you can vote for episode topics. So whenever we do our next Disney one, maybe it'll be in the poll and you can, have a say in what we're talking about. So that's where it's at. It's a happening place. All right. Well, thank you, Laura and Kate. This was so much fun. Every time we chat, it's awesome.
Thank you, Kelly, for having us talk about Mulan.
So much fun. Thank you, Kelly.
Yay. And we'll chat with you guys next week with a What You Watching episode. Okay, bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening. If you want to hear more of our discussion on Mulan, including more discussion on the remake, Donny Osmond, and our favorite moments, you can hear a Mulan bonus episode by going to patreon.com/Fanimated and becoming a monthly donor. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Fanimated Podcast to stay up to date with all things animated, and don't forget to leave a rating and review telling us what you'd like us to watch next. The music is provided by Purple Planet Music, and the art is done by myself. You can find me on Instagram at CandorDraw. Thank you so much to Kate, Laura, and Ferg for joining me, and we'll be back next week to discuss what we've been watching recently. So in the meantime, stay tuned and stay animated.
for some reason, Ferg got really excited about software.
I love that. As he should be. Ferg.
Ferg.
Crowley boy. He doesn't want to talk about software
He
anymore.
wants to lay down.
He's
Okay.
like, this lap is my lap.